Our first exercise is Chapter 29.3, number 1, bronchial adenoma. I have a note here for you that the adenoma is the morphological type of cancer we are working with, and bronchial is the site of that cancer. So the first step in locating a code for a neoplasm is to refer to the main term for the morphological type in the alphabetical index, and then to review the sub-entries. And for some types, a specific diagnosis is provided. This is taken directly from your Coding Handbook. I note the one guideline that is applicable here is if the histological term is documented. In this case, that is the adenoma. That term should be referenced first, rather than going immediately to the neoplasm table in order to determine which column in the neoplasm table is appropriate. If you remember, the neoplasm table has malignant primary, malignant secondary, benign, in situ, those undetermined, I believe, is the last one. So we'll look at that in just a moment, but just to be aware that sometimes you will go directly to the alphabetical index, other times I go directly to the neoplasm table. So with experience, you will know. In the case of adenoma, I've selected code D38.1. So now let's go to the document camera. And you can see here I have adenoma. We go down to bronchial. There we go. D38.1. And you see that if the documentation had cylindroid type in it, then it tells you to go here. So you're always going to be watching for these C notes, S-E-E, so that you know where to go. But in this case, it looks like D38.1 is going to get us where we need to be. So let's go back in the tab. And here we are in the tabular, D38.1, neoplasm of uncertain behavior of the trachea, the bronchus, and the lung. And remember from previous lectures, the and in the alphabetical, in the tabular, the and in the tabular can be or. So the patient does not have to have cancer in all three of these sites. It could be read trachea or bronchus or lung. In this case, our medical documentation tells us that it was in the bronchus. The next exercise is Chapter 29.3, number 6, Hodgkin's sarcoma. In this example, the sarcoma is the morphological type, and the Hodgkin's is a more specific name that describes this specific type of sarcoma. When we go to the alphabetical index, you're going to see sarcoma, subterm Hodgkin's, and it refers us to lymphoma Hodgkin's. So then we look up the lymphoma word. I will show you what I mean in the alphabetical index. If we look here at sarcoma, and we go down to Hodgkin's, see here? Hodgkin's, C, lymphoma Hodgkin. So we're going to look up this term in our alphabetical index. So in the alphabetical index, we look up lymphoma at the very bottom of this page, and we're looking for, we're going to move up until we find Hodgkin's. Here it is, Hodgkin's. And as you see, there's so many sub-classifications. But the medical record documentation that's in this particular exercise doesn't give us very much specificity. So we're going to choose the less specific, C81.9. And as you remember, this little box means additional characters are needed. So let's go to the tabular and look up C81.9. In our tabular, here we are, C81.9, unspecified. And if you go down, we see all these possibilities, but our documentation didn't give us any sites at all, just unspecified site. So the correct code in this example would be C81.90. And here's the next example, 29.4, number 3, adenocarcinoma of the rectum and the anus. If the histological term is documented, that term should be referenced first, rather than going immediately to the neoplasm table in order to determine which column is appropriate. Coding Guideline HIT220.C.2. This is a general guideline, not a chapter-specific guideline. It doesn't look like. Okay, so we're going to look up our pathway of adenocarcinoma, and it's going to say, see also neoplasm malignant by sight. So in this case, instead of taking you to the alphabetical index, because I'm trusting that you're beginning to get the gist of this, so we'll go straight to the table of neoplasms, and our main term will be rectum. Then it's going to be indented with overlapping lesion with another indentation, anus or rectosigmoid junction. So let's go to the table of neoplasm. Okay, so we're in the table of neoplasms, and you notice across the top, primary malignant, secondary malignant, cancer in situ, benign, uncertain, and unspecified behavior. And we're going to look up rectum in this case. So we're going to go down here, and I have put a marker to help me read my indentation correctly. Rectum and colon, overlapping lesion with anus or rectosigmoid junction, C21.8, and we are in the malignant primary column, that first column. So that's how we find it in the table of neoplasm, and now we're going to look up this code in the tabular. And when we get here, we see C21.8, malignant neoplasm of overlapping sites of rectum, anus, and anal canal. Primary malignant neoplasm, 2 or more contiguous sites. So this is our correct code, C21.8. Our next example is 29.5, number 3. Metastatic carcinoma from the prostate to the pelvic bone. Previous prostatectomy with no recurrence at primary site. I show you in a little note there in this example, the prostate cancer is malignant primary. The pelvic bone cancer is malignant secondary. However, because the prostate was already removed, we use the Z85- category. The pelvic bone is the principal. And we have a guideline that directly relates to this. Primary malignancy previously excised. I'll let you read that for yourself. The Z85 code, personal history of malignant neoplasm, is used to indicate the former site of the malignancy. And then the table of neoplasm is where we would look up the pelvic bone cancer and find C7951. I want to go to this table of neoplasms just to show you, remind you again, be careful which column you're in so you read the right column. So we're in the table of neoplasm. We have malignant primary, malignant secondary. We know that this pelvic bone cancer is malignant secondary, so we're going to use the second column. Go down. We're in bone. See here? This is our primary term right here. Come down. We're looking for pelvic. Second column, C7951. And when we look up that code in our tabular, it's a pretty general code. Secondary malignant neoplasm of bone. So even though we had all those subterms under bone, when it comes to a secondary malignant, it's fine to use a more general term. So this is the correct code for this exercise. The next example is 29.5, number 6, metastatic carcinoma of the brain and the lung. And using what we learned from our coding handbook, we know that there's no determination in this documentation as to which is the primary site. So in this case, we're going to use that C80.1 code to indicate that we don't know which one is primary. The lung cancer as the primary, because of that table that's in your coding handbook, it says when the morphology type is not stated or the only code that can be obtained is C80.0 or C80.1, code as a primary malignant neoplasm, whatever you're looking at, whatever site, unless the site is one of those in the brain as a site of cancer is on that list. Therefore, the brain cancer is going to be coded as secondary. In this example, I don't believe it matters which code goes first, because the information we've been given doesn't tell us which one is the focus of treatment. So I think it's such a general statement, and honestly, in the real world, I don't think you would see this statement very often. I think the point the author is making is just trying to get you to use the coding handbook and recognize that there is consensus across the coding industry that certain sites are not coded as primary unless they aren't on that list, kind of exclusatory list. Okay, let's go to the next one. This is just where I show you from the table of neoplasm. In our previous slide, we showed the brain as the malignant secondary using that second column. The lung is our primary using that first column. It all relates back to that table on one in your coding handbook for why we allowed the lung to be the primary and the brain to be the secondary. Back to this though, because we didn't know, we had to use this C80.1 code in addition to the other two codes. Okay. All right. Let's go to our next one. And this is 29.8, number 15. Patient admitted for chemotherapy following an ovarectomy on the previous admission for carcinoma of the left ovary. If you don't remember your medical terms, ectomy usually means cutting out. So an ovarectomy would be the removal of the ovary. So she's had the removal of the ovary, and she's there for chemo. So our principal diagnosis is going to be the encounter for the chemotherapy. And that is found in the alphabetical index under encounter with the subterm chemotherapy for neoplasm. We also have to code her cancer, and that is ovarian, and it's primary malignant. I'll let you look that up for yourself in the table of neoplasms. And be mindful of a couple of things here. There is a guideline very specific to an encounter solely for chemo, immunotherapy, or radiation therapy. And it tells us that if the patient is being admitted solely for administration of one of those things, we are going to assign the appropriate Z code, which we just looked up, Z5111, as our principal diagnosis. There are guidelines, different guidelines, whether the patient is getting chemo, immunotherapy, or radiation therapy. And to also be aware of this guideline, current malignancy versus a personal history of malignancy, we're going to use this primary malignancy code, her ovarian cancer, until her treatment is completed. Once that chemo or radiation or whatever treatment is completed, then she would get that history of personal malignancy code. But until she gets all this treatment out of the way, you're going to code that cancer as an additional code with the principal diagnosis being the encounter for chemo.